Creating passive income can be as easy as simply investing in a nice, diversified dividend ETF. But not all ETFs are made the same, so in this video, we'll be reviewing 10 of the most popular ones and we'll rank them from best to worst. But before we get to those, in case you're new to the channel, my name is Ryne Williams, and here we strictly talk about dividend stocks and how you can invest in them to create passive income and reach financial freedom. So if you love dividend stocks and if you're on a mission to retire early, then hit that subscribe button. I'd love to stay in touch as we both continue to grow our portfolios and collect that cash flow. Also, leave me a comment below and let me know which ETFs you have in your portfolio. I'd be curious to hear if you own any of the ones that we'll be talking about in this video. But anyway, guys, when evaluating these different dividend ETFs, we'll need a consistent set of metrics. And for our purposes here in the video, we'll look at 5 specific things. We'll compare the dividend yields, the dividend growth CAGRs, the diversification, expense ratios, and each one's total return over the last 5 years. And truthfully, I'd prefer to look at the 10-year total returns, but some of these funds haven't been around for that long, so we have to look at the 5-year. But anyway, how this ranking system will work is that each fund will be given a score of up to 10 points in each category based on where they rank against all the other funds. For example, when we look at the total return, the ETF with the highest total return will get 10 points, while the one with the lowest total return will only get 1 point. And we'll approach it like this for each category. Now with that, guys, finally getting into the 10 dividend ETFs we'll be reviewing today. I'm sure a lot of these are going to look pretty familiar to you, like DGRO, SCHD, SPHD, VIG, and VYM. These are all some of the most popular ones. And then we have some others that you may or may not be familiar with, like DVY, FDL, HDV, NOBL, which only holds dividend aristocrats, and then SDY. But anyway, these are the 10 we'll be looking at, and like I said, we'll be reviewing 5 different categories here: dividend yield, dividend growth CAGR, diversification, expense ratio, and total return. And in theory, the one with the highest score will be the best dividend ETF to invest in, and then the one with the lowest score will obviously be the worst. But anyway, kicking it off with this first category here, looking at the dividend yield. Looking at the dividend yields across all these different funds, there is quite a range, guys, with FDL coming in with the highest yield at 4.44%, so they'll get 10 points because of that. The second highest yield is going to go to SPHD with a 4.33% yield, so they'll get 9 points. And then the third highest yielder is going to go to HDV with a 4.07% yield, so they'll get 8 points because of that. And then switching gears, looking at the funds with the lowest yields, we have DGRO with a 2.36% yield, so they'll get a 3. The second lowest yielding fund is NOBL with a 1.92% yield, so they get a 2. And then the lowest yielding fund out of the bunch is VIG with a 1.9% dividend yield, so they only get 1 point. Anyway, guys, with that, moving on to the next category, we are going to be looking at dividend growth. And the one with the highest dividend growth CAGR will get the most points. The one with the lowest dividend growth CAGR will get the lowest points, obviously. Anyway, taking a look at the fund with the highest dividend growth CAGR, we have SCHD, whose 5-year dividend growth is coming in at about 14%, so they will get a 10. In second place, we have DGRO with a 10.64% dividend growth CAGR, and DGRO is looking pretty good so far, so they will get a 9 in this category. And then in third place, we have VIG with a 9.89% dividend growth CAGR, so they'll get an 8. And then switching gears, looking at the lowest growth funds, we have VYM with a 6.08% dividend growth CAGR, so they only get 3 points in this category. The second to lowest fund is going to be NOBL at 5.79%, so they get a 2, and this one's not off to a great start so far. And then the lowest growth fund is going to be SPHD with a 2.65% dividend growth CAGR, so they only get a 1, and this is in contrast to the high yield that we saw from them a moment ago. And taking a look at the total scores so far, just based on the dividend stats, in first place, guys, the one with the most points is FDL with a 17. So not only did this one have the highest yield, but it also had a pretty decent dividend growth CAGR. But anyway, in second place, believe it or not, is SCHD, who had a decent yield and the highest dividend growth CAGR. And then in third place, we have HDV, who looks like they had a decently high dividend yield, so they got an 8 in that category, and kind of a middle of the road dividend growth CAGR. They get 5 in this category, so their total score right now is 13. And then just looking at the last place position right now, it's NOBL, who only has 4 points. Low yield, low dividend growth, so not much to speak of with NOBL so far. And with that, guys, moving on to the third category, we're looking at diversification. And how this one's going to work is the fund with the highest number of holdings will get the most points, and then the fund that is the least diversified with the lowest number of holdings will get the least amount of points. And in first place here, it looks like VYM is the most diversified with 465 different holdings just in this one ETF, so they get 10 points there. In second place, we have DGRO, who is on a roll so far, guys. 432 different holdings within this fund, so they get 9 points. And then VIG is the third most diversified fund with 317 holdings, so they get 8 points. And then looking at the funds that are least diversified, we have HDV, who only has 81 holdings, so they only get 3 points in this category. And then once again, guys, NOBL is in the bottom 3. This is the third category in a row where they have scored poorly. But anyway, they have 69 holdings, so they only get 2 points. And then the fund that is the least diversified, who's also kind of slack in this category in the last one, is SPHD, 52 holdings, so they only get 1 point. And then once again, guys, taking a look at the totals so far, we have 3 different funds who are tied for first place. DGRO with 21 points, FDL with 21 points, and also SCHD with 21 points. And then once again, guys, in last place, we have NOBL, who has scored 2s in every single category. They are second to last in all 3 that we've looked at so far. So this fund is really not shaping up to be a good one, but let's see how the rest of it plays out. Anyway, moving on to the 4th category, guys, we are looking at the expense ratio. And how this one will work is the fund with the highest expense ratio will get the lowest amount of points. We don't want to pay a lot in fees, so we want to see those low expense ratios. On the other hand, the fund with the lowest expense ratio will get the most amount of points. And as we can see here, guys, there are 3 funds, VYM, VIG, and SCHD, that all have the same low expense ratio. So they are tied for first. We'll give them all 10 points in this category. And then on the other hand, the fund with the highest expense ratio is FDL, coming in at 0.45%, quite a bit higher than what we're seeing with VIG, VYM, and SCHD. But anyway, they will only get 5 points in this category for having the highest expense ratio. And with that, guys, taking a look at the totals, we have SCHD, who's just taken the lead with 31 points in total so far. In second place, we have DGRO, who now has 30 points, pretty close to SCHD. We'll see what happens in this last category, but they're looking pretty good too. And in third place here, we have VYM with 28 points. And really, guys, it's pretty dang close. So anything could happen in this last category with total return. But anyway, looking at the one with the lowest score, once again, it's NOBL, who only has 13 points. Not great. But anyway, this brings us to the last category of the day. One of the most important as well, total return. And obviously, the fund with the highest total return across the last 5 years is going to be awarded the most points. And on the other hand, the fund with the lowest total return is going to have the lowest points. And in first place with the highest total return, we have SCHD, who's generated about 67.5% over the last 5 years, so they get a 10. In second place, and also not by much, we have VIG, who generated a 64.64% total return over the last 5 years, so they get a 9. And then in third place, we have DGRO with a 58.5% total return, so they get an 8. And then the 3 losers in this category are going to be DVY with a 42% total return, so they only get a 3. HDV in second to last place with about a 40% return, so they only get 2 points. And then the worst performer over the last 5 years is SPHD. Surprisingly, NOBL held up pretty good. They got a 7 for this category, which is their best so far. But anyway, back to SPHD, only 22.5% total return, so they only get a 1. And with that, guys, we have our grand totals across all 5 of these different categories. SCHD came in first overall with 41 points. And looking at these stats, they had the highest total return, they were tied for the lowest expense ratio, and they also had the highest dividend growth CAGR out of the bunch. In second place, we have DGRO with 38 points. And although they weren't the best in every category, they came in pretty strong with a high dividend growth CAGR, a wide amount of diversification, a very low expense ratio, and also a pretty respectable total return. And with that, guys, in third place with 36 points total, we have VIG, who had the lowest dividend yield out of the bunch, but all the rest of these were looking pretty good. A really high dividend growth CAGR, nice amount of diversification. They were tied for the lowest expense ratio, and overall had the second best total return out of the bunch. So this fund was also looking pretty good. And then switching gears, taking a look at the worst funds out of the bunch, we actually had 2 that were tied for last place. But before we get to that, DVY was second to last, who only scored 26 points. It looks like DVY had a decently high dividend yield, but the rest of these categories did not score so well. A decently low dividend growth CAGR, an okay amount of diversification, kind of middle of the road expense ratio, but a really poor total return that in total awarded them only 26 points. And then, like I said, we have 2 that are tied for last place. We have NOBL, which is no surprise, and we also have SPHD tied in last, both with 20 points. Now, NOBL had a pretty rough start, coming second to last in the first 3 categories, but they picked it up in the expense ratio and total return department. Their expense ratio was one of the lower ones out of the bunch, and the total return was also one of the best as well. Now, SPHD, on the other hand, was only strong in 2 categories. They had a high dividend yield, the second highest yield out of these 10 funds, and they also had a decently low expense ratio, one of the lower ones out of the bunch. But the dividend growth CAGR was the lowest. Diversification, they had the lowest number of holdings within the fund, and then the total return was the worst out of all 10 of these. So they, once again, only got 20 points. And with that, I still see so many people who are invested in SPHD when there are clearly so many other better funds out there to choose from. But people still like to buy it because it pays a monthly dividend. And I know I've said it before, guys, I'll say it again, but don't buy something just because it pays you a dividend every single month. There are so many other factors to consider. But anyway, guys, back to this. The last thing that we're going to look at is the percentage grade column right here. And this assigns a grade, or a percentage grade rather, for each of these funds out of 100. And looking at the grade here for our top dog, SCHD, they got an 82%, which is not too bad. You know, if this was a test score, that's a B-, but either way, SCHD is top of the class. In second place, we have DGRO with a 76%. You know, that'd technically be a C+, still still a passing grade, not too bad. And then in third place, once again, we have VIG, 72%, also a passing grade, a C-, we'll take it. But then guys, the rest of these here in the red, they all would have failed. So if you were going to invest in any of these funds, you're probably going to be best off choosing one of these three here that received the passing grade: VIG, DGRO, or SCHD. But anyway, if you like seeing these ETFs ranked from best to worst, then check out this next video where I'll be ranking the top monthly dividend paying stocks. We'll be reviewing 10 of the most popular monthly payers to see which ones will be worthy additions to your portfolio, and also to see which ones you should just forget about, because there are some really bad monthly payers out there, guys. So click right over here to check it out, and I'll see you in the next one.